Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday morning. My name is Kelsey Bergfeld, and I'm the Director of Advocates for Ohio's Future, or AOF. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan coalition of over 500 state and local health and human services policy, advocacy, and provider organizations that strive to strengthen families and communities through public funding for health, human services, and early care and education. We work to empower and support nonprofit organizations and the health and human services workforce in the critical work they do, especially as it relates to lifting up and caring for all Ohioans. I'm very honored to be joined by a number of my leaders today. As a coalition of a broad range of health and human service organizations, we unite to identify and prioritize the greatest needs, people and families across the state. Over the past few months, hundreds of organizations, advocates, and citizens have testified to our elected leaders about the real needs of Ohioans. They asked our leaders to create a state operating budget that truly prioritizes and supports families, children, and older adults, with the goal of making Ohio the best state to live, work, raise a family, and age. Unfortunately, until about a week ago, decision makers were brave and bold enough to truly listen. AOF commends Governor DeWine and the House of Representatives for their significant investments in programs that provide economic security, access to healthcare, help people get to work, and empower Ohio residents. The substitute bill presented by Senate leadership strips away the most transformative policies and investments proposed by the governor and passed by the House of Representatives and moves Ohio further from that shared goal. By cutting proposed increases in healthcare coverage for kids and pregnant women, access to publicly funded childcare, pro-housing provisions, eroding funding for public K-12 education, underfunding Ohio's food banks, and adding red tape to make it harder for Ohioans to receive assistance when they need it, the Senate proves their priorities do not align with the people of Ohio and the families that make it such a great state. I'm honored today to stand with policy experts and leaders from across health and human services sectors who understand that investing in the health and future of our state's greatest resources, our people, creates endless opportunities and is truly the greatest return on investment our leaders can make. I'd like to invite our first speaker, Lisa Hammer-Fugit, the Executive Director of the Ohio Association of Food Banks, to the stage. Lisa.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you, Kelsey, and thank you all for attending today. I am Lisa Hammer-Fugit, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Ohio Association of Food Banks, and have since 2001. Since that time, I have witnessed our state navigate recessions, natural and man-made disasters, infant formula to food recalls that have threatened the health and safety of our babies and our citizens, a once-in-a-century global pandemic that cost over 1 million Ohioans their jobs, enduring to respond through widening wage gaps and wealth inequality, ever-evolving economies, and a changing food supply chain that has resulted in fewer donations and record high cost for food. But I have never seen anything like what we are currently witnessing. Since the spring of 2022, we have seen quarter after quarter of record demand for help with food. From January through March of this year, we served 3.2 million people, more than 30% more than we served just the quarter the year before. And that was before the pandemic year's supplemental nutrition assistance, or SNAP, emergency allotments, which kept 1.5 million low-income Ohioans from deeper poverty, hunger, and food hardship for 3 years, which ended in March. We conducted an anonymous survey of over 2,000 food bank clients from rural, suburban, and urban communities across Ohio from April 14th to May 7th. The results of this survey, which are representative of the statewide experience of our clients, are deeply troubling and are weighed heavily on my 12 members and our 3,600 food pantry, soup kitchens, and homeless shelters that we partner with to protect Ohioans from suffering deeper food insecurity and hunger. The study found that in the last 2 to 3 months, more than 68% had to choose between food and transportation and gas. 66% had to choose between food and utilities, and 55% had to choose between food and medicine or medical care, and nearly half were choosing between food and housing. 8 in 10 of these respondents told us that high food cost was the reason that they were seeking help from our network. And 2 in 3 adults said that their households cut the size of the meals or skipped meals because there wasn't enough money for food in the last 12 months, including 1 in 3 who told us that they were doing so every month in last year. Ohioans are regularly going without the basic right to healthy, wholesome food. They are endangering their physical and mental health and well-being. Furthermore, 54% of respondents said that they felt down, depressed, and hopeless since March. Our communities are giving generously, but philanthropy can't keep Ohioans fed day in and day out. We need sustained and substantial help from every sector, or we risk getting much worse. Worsening healthcare and educational outcomes, reduced worker productivity for families and older adults who are feeling increasingly hopeless. That's why we are grateful to the Ohio House that included $15 million in additional funding per year in its fair and balanced budget for the Ohio Food and Agriculture Clearance Program, 2 sound and proven food assistance programs that have been cost effective. They also provided additional funding to eliminate the reduced price category for meals so kids wouldn't have to endure school lunch shaming. That's why we are so disappointed and disturbed that the Ohio Senate Finance Committee budget introduced last week has eliminated the additional funding for Ohio foodbanks that was passed by the House, returning us to level funding $24.55 million, a functional cut to funding during this sustained and historic levels of need and high food and fuel costs. It eliminates the state's funding to offset the cost of reduced price school meals for students as passed by the House, and those modest investments that would give our kids access to free meals during the school year. It's a long list of harmful provisions that you will hear from shortly from my colleagues. Would also provide massive expansion of government bureaucracy and mandates that implementation of numerous provisions intended to take away 100% federally funded SNAP food assistance from hundreds of thousands of Ohioans. It creates other barriers to public benefits such as Medicaid. The SNAP provisions are punitive, misguided, anti-worker, and anti-family. One of the Senate SNAP requirements is to reinstate the asset limit, meaning low-income Ohioans who own a used car worth more than $2,250, a car they need to get to work, would either have to sell their car or lose their food stamp eligibility. These provisions also ban the executive branch from implementing allowable USDA waivers and exercising its best judgment about whether it is appropriate to waive time limits on SNAP benefits when an economic condition warrants doing so. If a natural or man-made disaster, mass layoff, plant closure, or shed, a new recession leads to spiking unemployment. This will leave the governor without the tools to aid those who lose their job through no fault of their own and can no longer afford food. It also expands the work requirements and work reporting requirements for 16 to 59-year-olds, making Ohio's failing SNAP employment and training program the most extreme of its kind in the country by taking SNAP away from 385 million Ohioans, including 170,000 children. These provisions would drive Ohioans in need away from 100% federally funded food stamps, instead driving them into our food bank and food pantry lines, which are already swelling well beyond anything we've experienced, including that of the height of the pandemic. In short, the Senate budget would be a disaster for Ohio food banks, Ohio's children, parents, caregivers, workers, job seekers, older adults, and disabled residents that are struggling under the weight of more than a year of record high food and housing inflation, rapidly rising cost of utilities, transportation, and other basic needs, and the loss of pandemic-era relief programs that have kept them afloat. It would seriously destabilize our social safety net and put countless people at risk of hunger. We urge the Ohio Senate to rectify many of the wrongs it has made in its budget. Look at the House passed budget, which is fair, reasonable, balanced, and focused on investing in economic security and opportunity for all Ohioans. I'll turn it over at this time to Tara Britton from the Center for Community Solutions. Tara.
Good morning. Thanks, Lisa and Kelsey, and really appreciate being here with everyone today. Thanks for asking me to be here. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy with the Center for Community Solutions. While we all get caught up in the busy season that is the state budget, what I know always leaves on all of us, and particularly since the Senate introduced its version of the budget last week, is the real life impact that these policy and funding changes have on human beings. It feels pretty amorphous while we're talking about it here in the Statehouse, but these are real moms and sisters and dads and brothers and kids and teenagers and grandparents who live in families in Ohio, and they won't be able to afford healthy meals or have affordable access to healthcare or a roof over their heads. Just wanted to start off by grounding my comments here before I get into the wonkiness of the policies. We're here today because of our fellow Ohioans who are wonderfully diverse and have different life experiences than many of the policymakers who represent them here. That's vitally important for them here. I'm going to talk a little bit about healthcare access in a couple of different programs. I'm going to start off by talking about doulas. We're disappointed in the removal of the provision that the House added to the budget that would create a certification process for doula and provide Medicaid reimbursement for doula services. So that certification process is vital to be able to have Medicaid reimbursements. Those two things need to go together. This issue has bipartisan support across both chambers, and we implore the restoration of this provision. To keep us focused on the real people impacted, we know that increasing access to doula services has been proven to improve maternal and infant health outcomes, especially for Black women and babies. The involvement of doulas into the normal course of care before, during, and after childbirth has proven to provide better birth outcomes for moms and babies compared to those that are without. Doula-assisted moms are 4 times less likely to have a low birth weight baby and are 2 times less likely to experience a birth complication involving themselves or their baby. And this is at a time where we're still seeing high infant mortality and high maternal mortality rates, and we know that this can make a difference. We think that everyone who wants a doula to be part of their pregnancy and postpartum experience should have one, which is why it's so important for Medicaid to cover these services. Also related to the health of children and pregnant women, we strongly supported the governor's proposal to increase Medicaid eligibility to 300% of the federal poverty level for children and pregnant women, and ask for the restoration of this provision. This policy will go a long way in ensuring continuity of coverage and access to care, especially during the critical postpartum period where we're seeing increased maternal morbidity and mortality in Ohio and across the nation. This will also build upon work that the Senate did in the last state budget by inserting the coverage expansion for the postpartum period within 60 days to 1 whole year. The Senate did that 2 years ago, and this policy, if we put this back into the budget, will make a big difference. We also were very excited to see that the House had inserted continuous coverage continuous Medicaid coverage for children to their 4th birthday. The Senate removed this provision in the budget it introduced last week, and we encourage restoration of this provision. Continuous coverage means that once a child in this age range, so up to their 4th birthday, is enrolled in Medicaid, they would stay enrolled without an annual redetermination until the age limit coverage ends. We know that this is really important. Our research shows that when parents lose Medicaid coverage for whatever reason, there are significant rates of coverage loss for their kids, even though those children may still be eligible for Medicaid. This is because we cover kids up to a higher income range in the Medicaid program, but their parents may think that if I lost coverage, my child also did. We want to make sure those kids stay covered. Other states have adopted or are exploring policies related to continuous coverage for young children, and we know what a difference this will make. It's our collective responsibility to keep Ohio's children safe and healthy, and it is critical that kids have access to health coverage. Restoring this policy in the budget will go a long way into it. So I just want to thank you all for being here today. Appreciate being able to talk about these policies and encourage a shift back to what the governor and the House had introduced, because we know that that is policies that will place. I'd like to introduce my AOF colleagues.
Thank you, Tara and Lisa, for all that information, especially for that grounding. That's what it gave us putting this. Well, I'm supposed to talk about education. This my ground would be that we can't talk about education outcomes without addressing every single one of the issues that you're going to hear about from the people here today. And that's why when I get up here today, you may detect a little bit of anger in my voice, because it's becoming very frustrating that we continue to, let me rephrase, I don't want to say we, because it's not us, that people in the legislature and the Senate continue to defund the things that are important to us, that are important to education outcomes, important to children's future, while expanding pieces that have not been proven to have any impact. So let me go into a little bit more detail. So we've been pushing for their school funding for a few years now. We got it through in the last Miami budget. We went through well in the House. The Senate, however, is decreasing the amount that the House put in by $540 million. But what makes that even worse is that what the Senate has proposed would make every Ohio family eligible for some amount of a private school voucher, regardless of their ability to pay for private schools or the quality of their local public schools. In other words, the state is going to fund wealthy families getting a voucher. So up to 450% of poverty level will be receiving a voucher. After that, it's means tested that every family will at least get a 10% voucher. Even though vouchers have not been proven to have an impact or a positive impact on education outcomes. Let me just give a few examples. In Indiana, students in private school voucher programs experienced significant losses in achievement in math and saw no improvement in reading. According to a Brookings Institute report, a student who had entered a private school with a math score at the 50th percentile declined to the 44th percentile after 1 year. In Louisiana, students who started in public schools and transferred to private voucher schools dropped from the 50th percentile math to the 26th percentile in a single year. Harvard professor Martin West called the negative effects on students in Louisiana the largest he's seen in the history of American education research. In Ohio, a study by the Fordham Institute found that students who use vouchers to attend private schools have fared worse academically and compared to their counterparts in public schools. In Milwaukee, where private school vouchers have been in place since the 1990s, African American students ranked second to last for 8th grade math scores and last for reading scores. And a study of 110 Milwaukee voucher schools found that 39 had no art, music, physical education, library, or technology specialist teachers. We could go on and on and on with this. Research has been pretty clear. Vouchers do not have a positive impact on student outcomes when you are comparing voucher students to their equivalent in the public school. On the other hand, While the House proposes 450% of poverty level, the Senate is saying basically universal vouchers. We see that in Ohio, that in order to qualify for food assistance under the WIC program, a family in Ohio must earn less than 185%. To qualify for publicly funded childcare, they must earn less than 142% of the poverty level. To qualify for pre-K early education funds, they must earn less than 200% of the poverty level. To qualify for Medicaid, they must earn less than 150% of the poverty level, or for CHIP, 206% of the poverty level. And to qualify for Ohio Works First, the financial assistance portion of the state's TANF program, a family must earn less than 50% of the poverty. Yet every single one of those pieces that I just mentioned would improve education outcomes for students. So if this state is serious, really serious about doing what's best for students, about making sure that they can have positive education outcomes and a future beyond school, the state has got to stop putting, whether the estimate is 500 million to $1 billion in vouchers, and instead invest in every single thing that these people are telling you they need to invest in. Let's put that money to use in places where it actually is going to help not only children, but families and their communities. We have to put a stop to this increase of vouchers, and we have to put a stop to defunding the pieces that really are going to help students. That is really, there's a lot of other problems that we have with the vouchers and within the budget. There's only one other piece though that I'm going to actually bring up, and that is also the inclusion of Senate Bill 1 within the budget. Senate Bill 1, for those of you who may not be aware, is basically taking away power from the elected state board of education and instead creating a new department under the governor to take over control of public education. Again, why are we taking power away from people that we elected at a local level to represent us and putting it under the hands of the governor? A bill like this has no place in a budget. A bill like this should be a standalone bill where people can come and testify, which they have in large numbers, and said that they are not in favor of this bill. Putting it in a budget and forcing legislators to make a choice between a budget and restructuring of public education is not the right way to enact this type of legislation. So we request that that be taken out of the budget, and we urge the Senate to reject the expansion of vouchers, restore funding to the Fair School funding formula, and fund all these programs that my colleagues are talking about today. Thank you. Now I'll introduce my colleague, Renee Gibbons, Chief Operating and Field Sales Supervisor.
Good morning, and thank you to Advocates for Ohio's Future for inviting Groundwork to be part of this humbling press conference. I'm Renee Gutierrez. I'm the Chief Operating and Policy Officer at Groundwork Ohio. Groundwork is the nonpartisan nonprofit council research and advocacy organization focused uniquely on prenatal decline period of time in life. Pregnant women, infants, toddlers, and preschool age children. We champion early learning and healthy development strategies in that period of time. Upon review of the Senate's proposal, we're here joining with fellow advocates asking for full restoration of Governor DeWine's budget as it concerns young children and families. We were really pleased to see that the Senate had maintained the Department of Children and Youth, and we were deeply disappointed as we continue to investigate the budget to find that so many of its choices undermined its intent by disinvesting in vital programs and solutions for Ohio's youngest children. While the House had cut the department by $18 million over the biennium, eliminated $150 million investments in federal funds and child care scholarships for critical care applications, the Senate has further cut the department by an additional $149 million and walked back significantly on the investment of more than $200 million in increased access to child care. At this point in the budget process, Ohio's youngest and most vulnerable children have weathered cuts that surpass $500 million from Governor DeWine's proposal. The current bill further reverses progress on our most urgent crisis, child care and workforce crisis, infant mortality crisis, and our state mental health crisis. To detail some of the cuts from those. The current proposal cuts $366 million of the governor's proposed budget to support increased access to quality childcare for low-income working families and parents working in critical occupations, including childcare professionals themselves who make on average 12 hours an hour, and diminishes the state's remaining commitment to ensuring the quality care needed to support our future workers. Regarding the infant mortality crisis, the governor's proposed investments focused on the health and well-being of pregnant women, babies, and children were cut by nearly $35 million, not including the value of the harmful eliminations of extended Medicaid coverage for pregnant women and children up to 300% of the federal poverty level, and children with special health care needs adopted through private agencies, and continuous coverage for pregnant women and babies up to the age of 3. Finally, regarding the mental health crisis, the governor's proposed investment in the only state budget line discreetly supporting young children's mental health was cut by 70%, and family and children's services were cut by 111 million. My testimony that I delivered to the Senate Finance Committee on June 8th includes a comprehensive list of approximately 20 requests to restore funding and language to the governor's proposed budget. I want to talk a little bit more. We hear every day constantly about the workforce, and that's our story too. Workforce, and it starts with babies who in 18 years or so will become our workforce. We know that most Ohio kids aren't ready at the kindergarten level. We have to do something different before then, because we know that children start happening safely. 62% of Ohio kindergartners enter the classroom not ready to learn. It's no surprise then that as we look at 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, high school graduation, that those gaps persist over time. And it goes from 62% to 76% of economically disadvantaged children in terms of kindergarten learners. It's our parents, our current parents need childcare work, and we have a parental workforce in the sidelines as jobs go unfilled because of childcare. Groundwork Ohio published a poll of public opinion strategies, and we found that nearly 70% of working moms would go back to work or work more hours if their child had access to quality and affordable childcare. And the barriers to childcare are getting worse. It's unacceptable that a majority of parents in our state report with children under 5 reported that they are someone they know are on a wait list for childcare. And then 4 in 10 of those parents have been on a wait list for more than 6 months. And finally, it's about employers who feel this impact deeply as well and lost productivity and revenue when 800,000 Ohio working parents cut back their hours due to childcare barriers. Now is the time to make the bold changes necessary to focus on the results our taxpayers demand, our parents expect, and our communities need. And that means investing in young children and childcare, again, which is why we're here asking for restoration of the governor's budget. Finally, as we've been talking about the impact on families, I had the opportunity, our team reached out to our growing network, Family Action Network at Groundwork Ohio, to ask for their response as they learned about the Senate cuts to the bill. And I'll leave you with 3 quotes. They want us to work, but we have no childcare. This will keep my family in the same cycle that got me here, poverty. My family will not survive living in this state. If you stand with these families, please stand with us as we ask for restorations to the budget, and please consider joining us, groundworkohio.org. We have a campaign going right now, sending policymakers to the state legislature and the governor so that all of them are aware where we stand when it comes to kids and families. Please lend your voice to that campaign again, groundworkohio.org. Thank you so much. I now have the pleasure of introducing my colleague, Dr. Guillermo Verdejo, State Policy Fellow with Policy Matters.
Morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be speaking amongst these distinguished speakers who have highlighted the urgency of the moment, the need the kinds of critical public institutions that put a roof over our head, both metaphorically and sometimes literally. I have the fortune of speaking about the pillars that hold up that roof, right? I have the fortune of speaking about revenue, ways that we come together and collectively put our resources to the things that we hold true, the things, the moral questions that that make our community what it is. Right? In policy matters, where I work as state policy fellow, we believe in equitable thriving Ohio. We believe that we can make sure that caregivers have the resources they need. We can make sure that at the schools in every single zip code, provide a world-class education. Yet, what we see in the Statehouse, what we've seen in the Statehouse for the past 2 decades, is a continued effort to land blows on those pillars, right? And continued effort to crumble the very foundations of this, right? So what is proposed in the Senate budget? It's a new tax cut for the wealthy, a new tax cut for the big corporations, right? And a continued effort to undermine the capacity of working class, everyday Ohioans to do the things they want to do in their communities. The income tax cut that is proposed in this Senate budget bill, make no mistake, is a cut for the wealthiest amongst us. It is another blow on those very pillars. And it is in a time of turmoil. I mean, we've just come out of a pandemic. If you've been following the news, there's a storm coming. And we are undermining the pillars of that roof, the pillars that holds these communities together. So what is in this bill? What is in this tax cut? 84% of the value of the tax cut will go to the top 20% of Ohio. If you're in the bottom half, if you're a household with $62,000 or less, in this state, you will get nothing or very near nothing from this tax cut. In fact, it is less than nothing, because all these critical public institutions that my colleagues have been speaking about, they will be cut. They will need to be cut eventually. There's no doubt. And this is what they are providing us. They're providing us a way into the ground, a way to crumble the very roof over our heads. 84% of that value will go to the top 20%. Some people in the middle income will see a tax increase because of the way that they designed the tax cut. Tax increase, tax cut. It boggles the mind. It boggles the mind. So let me talk a little bit more about what else is in the budget. We are seeing a proposed expansion of the sales tax holiday at the beginning of the school year, which inevitably, this does provide some benefits to certain people, no doubt. But who benefits most from a suspension of the sales tax? It's the people who spend more money. Okay? Who pays more sales tax? People who spend more money. Once again, there are better, more efficient ways to do this. We have been listening in this very building. We have been listening to the siren song of corporate tax cutting propagandists for much too long. For the past 23 years, we've cut income taxes 12 times, and this would be a 13th time, and there is no reason why I'll be left. This tax cut in the past 23 years, we have not seen any kind of a reason to believe that this kind of strategy leads to anything other than that undermining of the foundations of Ohio. What about the corporate activity tax? They're cutting that too, 25%. You know who benefits that? I can bet you guess who it is. It is the corporations who are making over $100 million per year, which make up about 1%, less than 1% of the businesses in Ohio. They will get 60% of the benefit of that corporate activity tax. On the other hand, 65% of Ohio businesses will get 1% of the value of the tax. Why is that? Because they make revenues less than $1 million, so they're already paying either zero corporate activity tax, or they're paying the minimum amount of $150. So when we put this together, we're giving a tax cut for corporations that are making over $100 million a year, and we're talking about less than 1% of Ohio businesses. We're giving tax cuts to the top 20% of Ohio. What are we left with? what are we left with? If Ohio's legislators are serious about providing the stability that we need to weather the coming storms, we need to increase taxes on the wealthy. We need to provide support for working class, everyday Ohioans in the form of earned income, refundable earned income tax credits, and what we call the child tax credit, which is, a thriving families tax credit, which is a form of a child tax credit. These are the things that people in Ohio want. These are the things that the legislature of Ohio can provide. And these are the things that we have experts here to show us how to do it the most efficient and most effective way. So it boggles the mind, and it truly is worth highlighting the urgency of this moment, because we don't know what lies ahead. So with that, I'd like to bring on Mike, who is in the Chamber of Human Services. Thank you.
Thanks, Guillermo. My name is Mike Corey, and I'm the Executive Director of the Human Service Chamber of Franklin County, which is a chamber of commerce for a little over 170 health and human services agencies in Columbus area of Franklin County. I'm not going to say good morning to you because it is absolutely not. I'm a recovering lawyer, and my old boss, Kurt Tuttle, who's the managing partner of our firm, back in his Walker Vernacular, now it's he taught me once you should never drive angry and you should never speak publicly angry. But I'm angry. And you can't hear all of this testimony about this budget, which is weaponized to hurt people and not be angry. When I first saw the draft of this, it was so bad I thought it was a mistake. I think they couldn't have intended to do this as we come out of the pandemic, as we deal with the cessation of pandemic supports. And they're just going to make all these cuts. They're going to make things worse. This benefits nobody. It hurts millions. This doesn't make any sense. Send this back and do better. Let me start with that. So our members, as I noted, are tackling significant needs in our community right now. We've been keeping tabs through regular surveys of our membership, which span all of the subsectors of public human services, shelters, food banks, childcare providers, legal aid, immigration and refugee support services, and so on and so forth. The last 2 months, there has been a spike on top of the spike from the last 3 years in need across every single subsector. Our folks are slammed because folks are hurting. And this budget will make things worse. That doesn't make any sense. There are a few specific elements that I want to call out, some reiterating what my colleagues have shared. This budget would eliminate the provision expanding access to Medicaid for pregnant women and children. It adds a provision to force the Department of Medicaid to establish extreme work requirements. It restricts access to child care support for families at 145% federal poverty rate, resulting in 15,000 children and families losing access to care. It removes vital tax credits for affordable housing projects at a time when we need to be building faster to meet this spectacular growth. We're going to make it harder to build housing. That makes super sense. And it removes $15 million in funding to support our food banks at a time when our food banks are busier than ever. The food bank that we serve, the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, which serves hundreds of food pantries across our region, at its busiest series of months ever, earlier this spring. What are we doing? This budget is a mistake. Fix it. Ohioans in our economy cannot realize their potential if our workers, our people, can't get childcare, can't eat, can't get health care, and can't get a place to live. And the other thing this budget leaves out is there's no funding whatsoever preparing for our partial climate. We just experienced last week smoke-filled air because of global warming and its effects on qualities. We're not going to spend a penny preparing for that when we know global warming has been and will continue to have a disproportionate effect on the people our agencies serve, on the constituents of the people that drafted this erroneous budget. So we join with our leaders across the state. We urge lawmakers to remedy these and other harmful provisions and call for a budget like what Governor DeWine proposed initially that fortifies the essential supports that individuals and families need across Ohio. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Nick Bates, and I'm a proud Lutheran, a proud deacon in the Lutheran Church, a proud director of the Hunger Network in Ohio, and proud to serve as co-chair of Advocates for Ohio's Future this year. And I'm also proud to be an Ohioan. As a proud Ohioan, and as proud Ohioans here, one thing to say. OH.
I am.
OH.
I
OH. The reason why I love that cheer, it doesn't matter if you're here in Ohio or at a random airport or at a train station somewhere and you yell out OH, there will be that response to my own. Because we are one community, we are one people, we are Ohioans. And the other thing about this cheer is I can't do it by myself. It requires others to be part of it to make it complete. I believe in the same fashion as Ohioans, we have common values and priorities. I believe every Ohioan should want there to be less hunger. I believe every Ohioan should want more safe, decent, and affordable housing. I believe that all Ohioans should want all kids, regardless of zip code, regardless of economic status, to be cared for and have great schools to attend. I believe that all Ohioans understand that we should not be pitting childcare and food security and housing and education against each other, because we need all of these things to live a holistic and healthy life. Now, we can discuss and debate, and we can even disagree on how to achieve these goals. But at the end of the day, all of the work that occurs in this building and these sacred and hallowed halls should be moving us forward these priorities. We should all agree on that, right? Sadly, I think the Senate might have radically different priorities in mind. I don't care if a budget is the most conservative. I don't care if it is the most liberal. I don't care if it's the most red or the most blue. I don't care if it's printed in neon pink ink and it's the prettiest gosh darn budget that has ever been printed in this country. All I care about is the budget going to move us in a direction where more people will be fed, where more people will be treated with the dignity that they deserve, and more of God's beloved children provided opportunities to thrive in safe and beloved communities. There are many things in the Senate budget that we have already heard about today that don't even attempt to make our state stronger. Instead, these proposals are grounded in ideology and not sound public policy or the values that we share as Ohioans. We've heard about the changes to SNAP. These changes will not save money, and in fact, are going to cost the state more. I was looking through the LSE Comp Doc, which those of us who are budget nerds rely on religiously. And it said, quote, under one of their fiscal notes, potential administrative costs for CDJFSs to make additional eligibility determinations. In normal people speak, simply put, pay more, get less. More cost to local communities, fewer dollars available to buy food, fewer dollars available for our local economy. That just doesn't make sense. The goal is to reduce hunger. I don't know any business that would market their store as the pay more, get less. I don't know any church or nonprofit leader that would ask for more needless paperwork for their overstretched staff. Clearly, these proposals are not intended to help people be fed, save money, or even increase government efficiency. The Senate budget continues on by taking food out of the mouths of hungry children. The House proposed to increase resources for school lunches to make sure that reduce the amount of students struggling with debt. Because as we heard in testimony time and again and again and again from teachers and students and school lunch professionals, once a student's debt gets too high, the lunch must be thrown away. That is unconscionable. And the House proposed a very modest proposal to make that a little bit better. But the Senate decided to throw it out. I've engaged on many state budgets over my years. I remember the budgets during the Great Recession and in the years afterward. Difficult choices had to be made because we were struggling with resources. But this is not one of those years. This budget would rather cut taxes for billion-dollar corporations instead of fixing the childcare crisis in Ohio. The budget would rather expand vouchers for millionaires than fix public education funding for everyone. This budget doesn't get serious about TANF funding, but uses it as an excuse to avoid the difficult realities that Ohioans are facing. Instead of prioritizing Ohioans, this budget chases the label of being the most conservative budget ever. As scripture states, you cannot serve two masters. What are the priorities of our legislative leaders? This is a serious question, not rhetorical. We should all be asking what their priorities are. What master is it that they serve? Because this budget appears that they are serving the interests and the master of the wealthy, the well-connected, and an ideological label, and not the people of Ohio. Sadly, when I call out OH, I am not hearing IO coming back from the Ohio Senate. Thank you. This time, I'm going to have Kelsey Berkeley.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to all of our speakers for your time this morning. Really, I think if you walk away from this morning and anything from our speakers, it's that there are clear winners and losers that we see before us in this Senate budget. Unfortunately, those winners are not the people of Ohio. It's not families. It's not folks struggling to get to work and make ends meet. And there's still time. I want to reiterate, there's still time for changes. We expect another round of changes from the Senate this week. We know that the House and Senate, along with the governor, will duke it out for the conference committee. We hope that the sway and the shift of the policies that we see at the end of this process, when we come to the end of June, speak for Ohio families. They make the bold, courageous investments that we have called for today, that we have seen from the House and from the governor up to this point. There's time to change. You should and can do better. Folks, I want to thank you again. We are happy to answer questions for myself or our panel. I will also be around a little bit afterwards for questions from the press. So thank you again for being here, and certainly appreciate all of your advocacy and your time this morning as we continue the fight in the coming weeks. Thank you so much. We will remain available for questions. Other than that, folks, thanks again for being here.